people over, could we get started? Yes?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so Kathy, I turn it over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. I'm Kathy Rowe, a UCDC participant, and I'm currently interning for Representative Salud Carbajal, who I have the honor of introducing tonight. So Congressman Carbajal is the representative of California's 24th District, which includes UC Santa Barbara. He holds a BA from UC Santa Barbara and an MA from the Fielding Graduate University. As an immigrant himself, he has been a champion and a great example for people of color, and he'll share his story here tonight. And Representative Carbajal sits on the House Committee of Armed Services, the House Committee on Agriculture, and the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, where he was elected to serve as the vice chair. From environmental protection to healthcare and housing, he has been a representative for all since he assumed office in 2017. And now I turn it over to Professor Marc Sandalow to begin the program.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Congressman, for joining us. It's not as sunny and beautiful as it looks like behind me, obviously. It's dark and it's cold here, so congratulations to all of you folks in California. So Congressman, again, I'm going to start with about 15 minutes worth of questions. Anyone who's listening, please type questions into the Q&A. If you include your name, we'll call on you, and that way you can ask the questions yourself. If you don't want to ask questions, you can type them in anonymously, and I'll go ahead and ask them. But this is your chance to ask the Congressman questions, so get ready to do that. Let me start by asking you, and I almost hate to do it, but it's just sort of the obvious question to all members of Congress now. Where were you on January 6th during the insurrection, and how does it affect the way that you look at your job?
Well, I think that coincidentally, because of COVID, Nancy Pelosi told all House members that unless you're really part of the procedure, you should really be in your office because you don't want to be contracting or giving it COVID to anyone. So coincidentally, the majority of House members were in their offices, in their House office buildings, which are not at the Capitol. They're across the street, as you know. And on the floor, there were only supposed to be 20 US senators and about 20 members of the House. Right. However, Nancy also, knowing that it was going to be a historic day because of the certification of the votes, of the electoral votes, made it clear to House members that if you really, really wanted to go be part of history, we should coordinate with our office so that we could, in intervals of members, go to the gallery, not the floor, the gallery, and, you know, observe for a while, a half an hour, what have you. So I myself was in my office when everything happened. I was scheduled to go to the gallery, but what delayed me was that my wife happened to be in Washington because she came for the swearing in, and she decided to go with me to the office that day, the day of the insurrection. And the other person in the office was my chief of staff, Jeremy Tittle, who's also a UCDC alum, by the way. And so I went, got some Subway sandwiches, came back, was finishing my sandwich with my wife and my chief of staff. We were watching TV, so we started seeing the amassing of the crowd out there. And then, if I remember correctly, I think we got some kind of intercom message that the building was being breached, the Capitol building was being breached, to stay locked down in our offices. We started seeing it on TV like everybody across the country. But for some reason, it didn't seem as bad from the initial footage and from obviously being in our office. It wasn't until afterwards that more of the footage was made available. And you saw the seriousness of it and the violent motives displayed and actions that were being taken by this lawless mob that was incited by a sitting president. Basically, it was a coup d'etat. It was an amateur coup d'etat that didn't go anywhere. That's what it was. And it was violent, and no one is as much to blame as the former occupant of the White House, former President Trump.
So I mean, you spent a lot of time in the Capitol. I've been to the Capitol a lot of times. Safety is something that's never really crossed my mind, and I doubt it ever crossed yours. And I'm wondering now, you've got training, you've been in the Marines, but still, do you feel that you're secure there now?
I would say so. Well, right now there's additional security, as you know. There's still some National Guards folks. They put a perimeter of fencing. Certainly, Capitol Police got some religion and came to understand that they were woefully unprepared and misread the intel reports, whether they were accurate or not. The bottom line is they were misread or not enough prudent action was taken. I think things are heightened right now, so I think that we're at a time where it's probably the highest security than in recent years. But security is always on your mind as a member of Congress, especially politically. You kind of get assaulted by individuals called trackers. I don't know if you know what that is. Each party, mostly the Republican Party, they have individuals that show up on your face and start recording you and asking you all kinds of questions and annoying you and irritating you. And so
you sure these aren't just members of the media, right?
Yeah, no, not members of the media.
Okay,
these are
good.
individuals from political campaigns and parties who their goal is to film you and to ask you all kinds of questions, to agitate you and to get you on camera so later on they could use as ads against you. It's really bizarre. So you're always concerned about security in general, but the political shenanigans that go on in Washington also concern you. So it's all kind of related. You're always on heightened alert here at the Capitol and in your job, I think.
All right, so let me ask you, you were part of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which combines Republicans and Democrats to solve problems. And I looked at the webpage. It looks like you've got, 50 or 60 members, maybe something like that.
58.
58, okay.
Half Democrats and half Republicans.
Why? Sounds like a silly question when you're in Washington, but from outside of Washington, why aren't there 435 members? Why isn't every member of Congress part of this?
Well, I think you have different levels of ideological positions and perspectives here within Democrats and Republicans, from the left to the right and the middle. And not everybody is interested in trying to find common ground. Some people feel that they're here to push an ideology or a certain position, and they make no qualms about it, and they're unapologetic. They believe their job is not to compromise, but to come push raw politics to the nth degree. And then there's somebody like myself who believes that certainly we should always be cautious to not compromise on our principles and our values, but with few exceptions, most things we should be able to find common ground and compromise to move the ball forward, to solve the many challenges that our country faces.
So I'm sorry, go ahead, finish.
Life's all about compromise. You compromise in your relationship. I don't agree with my wife 100% of the time, and she doesn't agree with me. So it's okay. For some reason, compromise has become a dirty word, and that's really what's needed in Washington, I believe, to be able to continue to move the ball forward in terms of achieving solutions and get beyond this ridiculous gridlock that our country has come to hate about Congress.
So, but how do you do that? When I looked at this, they have a little bio of you and a quote, and you boasted, I think, accurately about the bipartisan initiatives you've been a part of. But you say that you had a bipartisan, you've championed bipartisan legislation on topics, and you include gun violence.
Yes. So let me tell you how that works and what that means. Anybody can sponsor legislation on any given day. Anyone, any member of Congress. But if you care about bipartisanship, if you care about broad coalitions, you will go out of your way to talk to people from the other side of the aisle about co-sponsoring some of your bills.
Sure.
It takes an extra step. So if I'm committed to walking the talk and demonstrating that for example, half of my bills are bipartisan, then at the very least, I should be able to go and find some Republicans that agree with me and are willing to be on my bills. And it also shows my desire to fulfill my mission, which is to work across party lines. So that's what it means. It means that you're committed to trying to find common ground and build relationships so that while you might disagree on a lot, you find little areas where you do agree and you can move forward in a bipartisan fashion.
So how, I mean, again, so gun violence is one where the perception is that there are no Republicans who are willing to curtail guns in any way. So what have you found Republicans willing to do on gun violence?
Well, for me, my bill, for example, is the Extreme Risk Protection Order Act. It's a red flag bill, as they call them. And what red flag bills are is that they provide due process for any individual, but if a family member or law enforcement official sees somebody who is a danger to themselves or other, or behaving to have a mental breakdown or something, you can actually go to the courts, get a restraining order after the court considers all the evidence, a temporary restraining order from allowing such individual to continue to have guns in their home or to purchase guns. So it's a way of identifying individuals and intervening before they do something rash. And who better than a family member, a brother, a mother? In my district, we had a case where there was a student who had some mental challenges. This is a mental illness. And for some reason, whether he was taking his medication, something went wrong. And he actually posted something online and contacted his mother and said, I'm about to do something really bad. And the mother was mortified, called the police in Santa Barbara and said, my son just said this. He has some mental challenges. Could you go check? They went to go check. They could not temporarily take his guns away. They couldn't really have the tools to do the intervention that's required. And since then, California has passed a red flag bill that allows for that, which is what I'm trying to do nationwide.
And you've got some Republicans who are willing to join in on that.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So let me ask you about Santa Barbara. Some student concerns, which I don't want to start off. We're zooming, so we can't do a revolution because some students might be very frustrated to hear this. But if I looked this up correctly, when you were an undergrad, annual tuition was roughly $1,300. That's $1,000.
You know, I'm 56 years old now. I can't remember the exact amount.
But it was a lot cheaper.
It sounds about right.
Okay.
$1,400, $1,500. And I can't remember. I believe that was per quarter, right? I think per quarter.
No, what I read, I went back and looked at the history. They said the annual tuition and fees. Annual.
I'm not sure that it was more. I don't remember it that low.
But Lord, so without arguing dollars and cents, it's a lot higher than that now.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
As you well know, UC is what can you do to make college more affordable for students?
Well, I think we need to really reform the Pell Grant financial aid system so that more individuals could have access and affordable opportunities to be able to pursue their higher education. I have a bill, for example, called Degrees Not Dead Act that would almost double the Pell Grant award amount. It would reduce the parental family contribution for those individuals that have up to 250% of the poverty rate level. It would also make universities and colleges more accountable for making sure their students are succeeding. So what we could do is make sure that we are providing more financial aid opportunities, increase the Pell Grant so that students don't have to take out as much student loans. And we also need to expand the student loan forgiveness program to include broader public service opportunities so that students can have an opportunity to write off their loans and contribute to society at the same time from the public good, nonprofit or government.
I know that you have worked on this at lower school levels, but I'm wondering about college. When they survey UC students on basic needs, something like a third of the students at Santa Barbara itself, which people think of as students go off surfing, it must be a lovely place, but a third of the students there say that they can't always eat healthy food because they don't have the money to do that. And I know you've introduced some bills at the elementary and high school level. What can you do for college students to make sure they got food?
Well, first of all, we did in COVID make sure that student eligibility for COVID economic relief packages that we passed, we made SNAP program eligibility available to students who have work study or have certain financial aid levels of income. That's one thing we've done. I've co-sponsored a number of bills. One of them is the College Student Hunger Act. The bill would allow students to qualify for SNAP and would create a SNAP Student Hunger Pilot Program. That's one. The other one is the Basic Assistance for Students in College Act, which establishes a $500 million competitive grant for schools, both 2 and 4 year universities, to help meet students' basic needs as food, housing, and childcare. So we need to do more of that. And we need to also forgive some of the student loan debt that has amassed. President Biden has talked about forgiving $10,000, up to $10,000. I think it should be more, but we'll take that if that's what he's willing to do. But we need to continue to look at how we could support our students, both for food security, enhanced financial aid, so that they could continue to have access to higher education in an affordable fashion.
So a lot of these things that you're talking about now, I mean, like this program, they're going to pass. I assume you can get them passed in the House where Democrats have control, and these are not radical measures. The Senate's been a problem. It's controlled by Democrats, but the filibuster will prevent a lot of this stuff from happening because one senator objects and it's going to be a problem. You in favor of getting rid of the filibuster in the Senate?
First of all, that's a decision that I have no control over. But yes, certainly it's enticing because if we ever wanted to pass a lot of legislation, not just for a few things, I think this is the time to do it. But keep in mind, when it's the other side has control, and they will at some point, if they do the same, we're not going to like that. So I'm always reluctant to set a precedent unless you're willing to abide by the consequences. And I think they've been reluctant to get rid of the filibuster for overwhelming legislation. And it's worked well for the American country. We don't get, we aren't whiplashed into having all this legislation passed when one party hasn't, then another party, and then they're just gonna go back and forth. And I think as much as we hate it, there's some stability in the system the way it is. But I think it's worth considering. The filibuster has been done away with in certain instances with cloture, reconciliation. The reconciliation budget process has been effectuated. Both parties do it when they're in control. The Republican Party did it a few years ago when they passed their huge tax proposal that gave 83% of the benefit to the top 1% wealthiest people in America. Certainly we're considering that because for the COVID economic stimulus package, the American Rescue Plan that Biden is putting forward for $1.9 trillion, we believe it needs to be a big bill to really help everybody who's hurting, from college students to childcare to opening our schools, to more aid for businesses, unemployed workers, direct payments, by the way. Students now that are listed as dependents as adults going to UCSB, but they're listed as adults, but dependents, listed as dependents on their parents' income tax, are going to be eligible for the next stimulus direct payments, which is going to be $400 per individual. So that's going to go to students as well. My son is 20 years old. He goes to community college. He wasn't eligible for direct stimulus payments because he was listed as a dependent of mine, of our family. But now he will be eligible, and that's just an example of of how it'll affect many college students.
All right, I'm going to ask just another question or two, and please, a few questions are coming in, which is excellent. I'll turn it over to students, but this is your chance to ask your a congressman, and some of them your congressman, a question. So, as a former member of the media, put him on the spot. For God's sakes, he's happy to do that. Ask him tough questions.
Yeah, no easy questions.
Right. I'm asking the easy questions. All right, so let me ask you just a couple of very quick personal questions, which, as Kathy mentioned in the introduction, you are one of the rare members of Congress of color. There obviously are now many, many more than there were, still a minority. But you're a Mexican American, that you were born in Mexico. As you don't need to tell you, the former president was not kind to people who were not born in this country. I'm wondering, at your level, I mean, you're a congressman. At your level, do you get held back at all? Do you think people look at you any differently because of your heritage?
I think inevitably you get some of that. You get that anywhere in our society. It's I wish we had a colorblind society, but the reality is that we don't. And you need to look no further than what happened to George Floyd by our own law enforcement, and some rotten apples that are in law enforcement, or individuals of color. You can look at the equity issues right now with the way the vaccinations are being implemented. The essential workers. It was blue collar workers that were keeping our country afloat. But yet they have some priority, but they're not the highest priority. So I think there's always that consideration of looking at you different, and as an immigrant or a Mexican American. But I've never let that hold me back. Maybe it's just my personality. I joined the Marine Corps, and being a veteran, I think, has somewhat mitigated what otherwise I think I would be confronted with or exposed to. Because throughout my career, I love to be able to throw that out. Whenever there's any hint of bias or somebody questioning my patriotism, I usually turn around and tell them, when I was in that foxhole, funny, I didn't see you there. And that kind of sets the tone for, don't go there.
Okay.
But no doubt, I think people of color and certainly have extra barriers that oftentimes they're confronted with. And in Congress, I think I'm pretty forward, so I express myself and get involved with as much as many issues as I like to. I also belong to the For Country Caucus, which is made up of Republicans and Democrats that are veterans that are in Congress. And that's also very bipartisan. And I'm one of the co-chairs of that effort. I'm involved with problem solvers. And so, yes, there's always an undercurrent of that, but you can either overcome it and keep going, or get caught up being a victim of it.
Okay, some students are ready to ask questions. And I believe the way this works now is we can unmic them, but I'm not sure that we can show their face. But I'm not sure that webinars will let us see them live, but so Carolina, let's go to Carolina first. And Carolina, why don't you start by just telling them where you're a student?
Hi, I want to thank you for coming and being here with us today. My question was, can't find it, but what motivated you to run for office, and how were you able to appeal to both left-leaning and right-leaning voters?
Well, first of all, what motivated me, I would say we're all a sum of our experiences. And let me go over here. So I immigrated to this country when I was 5 years old. First, we moved to Arizona, where my father was a miner in an underground copper mine. That mine closed at the end of my seventh grade elementary 6th grade elementary school year. And then my father, who was part of the Bracero program in the 50s and the 60s, and didn't have a formal education, was had the challenge of how he was going to continue to provide for his family. So he decided to move us to Oxnard, where he was familiar with, familiar terrain, having worked as a farm worker in that area. And when we moved there, he continued to work as a farm worker until he retired. But throughout my life, I saw the working conditions and the socioeconomic conditions of my family. And my father worked really hard. My mother had rheumatoid arthritis, and I was always at home with deformed hands and in pain. But that, in addition to having great teachers and counselors, helped me get to college. And then when I was in college, I was lucky enough to have met, after I finished college and joined the Marine Corps, I was lucky to have met a lady by the name of Naomi Schwartz, who ran for a county supervisor position, and she won. And she hired me to be her chief of staff after interviewing, of course. And that was perhaps my insight and foray into politics and government, government 101. So I served as her chief of staff for 12 years. And then when she decided not to run, I ran for office and served as a county supervisor for 3 terms, 12 years. And after that, the opportunity for Congress opened up, and I ran for Congress. But what motivated me? What motivated me, I think, was I think people run for various reasons. Some people run for the power. Some people run for the glory, the name ID. They just love to see their names in neon lights. A combination of things. For me, I got a taste of what government could do for people and the role government could play in a constructive way, learning and while serving as a chief of staff and then eventually a county supervisor. And I was able to do a lot of wonderful things, working across the aisle, whether it was healthcare. Santa Barbara County, for example, had the highest healthcare, the highest uninsured children rate in the state of California per capita. That was before the Affordable Care Act. So I got together with a Republican colleague of mine, and we introduced a healthcare initiative for children. And we put in millions of dollars, and we went from 17,000 uninsured children to about 1,200 uninsured children in a matter of years. And it was bipartisan. And that's just one example of the things that I was able to do with my colleagues that reminded me of all the things we could do in local government to address some of the challenges that our society and our communities face. And the list goes on of things that I was able to concentrate on and work on and bring about. But for me, it just reinforced that there's an important role for government in our society, and making sure that that it's fulfilling a role of helping people, helping businesses, and in some respect get out the way, but on the other way, help businesses, help families, help communities, be it parks, you name it. And I think I got the bug and the value of wanting to continue to do that as a county supervisor. And when the seat opened up for Congress, I thought, what a great opportunity to continue to do my public service for the area that I represent, and yet do it on the national and world stage, because indeed that's what we do when you consider the foreign policy and everything we do. And plus, I had been in county government for over 24 years. So I was 50 years old. I had been in government 24 of those years in county government. So it couldn't have come also at a time where I needed another challenge. And so it fulfilled a lot of different checks. Continue my service, continue doing good, and a new adventure in a different capacity.
All right, Joy. Joy, and then Kathy after Joy. Go ahead.
Hi. Can you hear me? Oh, there you are. Hi.
All right,
Urock
we can see.
Congressman, how are you?
Good.
Good. I need to get my question back up. Pardon me. My name is Joy. I am a Marine Corps retiree and a UCR student. My question is, as a member of the House Armed Services Committee, can you tell us if the committee anticipates legislation that will address sexual assault in the military or reform the Uniform Code of Military Justice, like the Military Justice Improvement Act?
Well, yes. We've been working on that for a number of years, but if you go through the archives, you'll see a speech of mine or my colleagues that we are making on, raising the sense of urgency that we've had enough, where the services have worked on this issue, but quite frankly, they have failed to really put in systemic changes. And we in the last NDAA passed some language and some provisions that will look at this and implement a more rigorous process by which sexual assault will be investigated and dealt with. Jackie Spear, Representative Spear, has legislation, and also in the last NDAA, moved forward the fact that we might want to consider, and I believe we're doing this as a pilot, taking certain crimes, adjudication of certain crimes, out of the hands of the military commanders, because and taking it outside the UCMJ, because they can't seem to get with it, and the UCMJ doesn't seem to have the type of adjudication that needs to occur for fairness and justice. So far too many women have been victims of sexual harassment in the military, and also the academies, another one. And so we need to do right by women and be more aggressive in addressing these important issues. And I'm all for moving forward legislation, and through the National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, any and all measures to make sure that gets achieved.
Okay, let's go to Kathy, and we'll go to Sochita after that. So again, keep your questions coming. Kathy has to be careful here because this is her intern boss she's speaking to. So
Yeah. So hello, Congressman.
Hi, Kathy.
With the recent rise in Asian hate crimes in America, what is your perspective on this issue, and how should we combat against this and rise together as a community? And what should we do as students to affect change?
Well, no group, be it LGBTQ, Latinos, African Americans, Asian Americans, no group should be subjected to any injustices of that sort. And I think that the Department of Justice at the federal level needs to work with our states and local communities to make sure that we are putting in place additional measures and aggressively going after these types of crimes, because that's what they are. They're crimes. And we need to ensure that we have a framework through legislation or otherwise that aggressively deals with these injustices, because, for instance, this week we're going to be passing the Equality Act to ensure that we are providing certain protections to the LGBTQ community, certain civil rights that they have not been afforded over the years. But just as we do that for the LGBTQ community, where we have disparities and equity issues, whether it's the African American community, as we saw with the George Floyd murder, whether it's the Asian American community experiencing these type of hate crimes, that I know, you know, the previous president really reveled in calling the coronavirus the China virus just to create more angst and hate and divisiveness. We need to deal with those crimes that are hate crimes because it shouldn't be tolerated in our society.
Thank you so much.
All right, so Cheetah and then Lauren.
Hello, my question disappeared. But I just want to thank you for being here today. And I am currently interning at the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. And one of the issues that we've been trying to push is a pathway to citizenship. So I was wondering why you think it's necessary to create a pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. And what would you say to your Republican colleagues who oppose it?
Well, the first step is that before you go to an earned pathway to citizenship, we never want to say people get citizenship, just wake up and hey, thank you. You know, it's an earned path to citizenship. That earn tends to give people who have some reluctance a better understanding of that there's always been a process by which people get to citizenship. But you know, there's 11 million individuals in this country that are undocumented. And I think there's always been a sense that we need to do what we can to provide a legalization pathway and a pathway to citizenship. And we need to do that comprehensively if we can. But the last time we tried to do it comprehensively was, I believe, in 2013. And politics got in the way of the House considering the proposal that the Senate had agreed on. Now, President Biden has put forth the American Citizens Act, or United States Citizens Act. And that's something we're considering, that's comprehensive immigration reform, basically. But in addition to that, we also have two other bills that are being considered separately, but on the same concurrent path. One of them is the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, and the other one is the Dream and Prosper Act. Because if for some reason we're not able to move forward the comprehensive immigration reform, the American Citizens Act, hopefully we have these that have gotten some bipartisan support in the past, and that will address 1/3 to 1/2 of those that are undocumented in our country in those sectors. One is the Dreamers and one is the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, the farm workers and their families. So I believe it's important to provide a legalization path for as many of those 11 million people. And I think just like all immigrants, once they get their legalization, green cards, permanent residency, that they should have an opportunity to earn their citizenship, to make sure they're paying their taxes, that they're not involved with any crimes, that they have the ability to petition to become US citizens of this country. And that's something that I think should be and will be available with some of the legislation that we'll be passing in the near future.
Do you think that DACA, I mean, we always have, lots of DACA students, dreamers at the University of California, probably some on the call and the Zoom right here tonight. Are you fairly confident that that can make it through now that there is a Democratic president?
I think so, but we're back to the filibuster again, but I think that those two areas, the Dream and Prosper Act and the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, have been somewhat, at least in the House, bipartisan. They've gotten bipartisan support on some level. And, we're going to also put the comprehensive immigration reform bill forward, and hoping that my Republican colleagues, if they can't get around a comprehensive immigration reform, which is CIR, that at the very least, they'll go to two things that I think have gotten good bipartisan support, and that is the Dream and Prosper Act and the Farm Workforce Modernization Act.
All right, Lauren.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for taking the time to speak with students. I really appreciate it. I'm sure many others do. My name is Lauren. I'm currently a fourth-year student at UC Santa Cruz. And my question is, as a Democrat and as a person of color, I'm curious to know how you maintain your composure and sort of level of professionality when working with others who hold potentially harmful or hateful views towards your identities or other marginalized identities.
You know, I think it goes back to the golden rule of treat others the way you want to be treated. And, you know, two wrongs don't make a right. I know that sounds like a cliche or like we've heard it in so many other, but I will tell you that what I have found, and it's a challenge. I don't want you to think that, oh, I got this down. I live it every day and I'm successful every day. I really have worked hard, and I talk to my son a lot about this because he's very passionate. He's a big progressive Democrat, and he is not very tolerant of people who don't have his views. And I always remind him, you're just like Trump. He's not very tolerant either. So if you want to be like that, then you're no different than what you don't like. And I think what we need to do is agree to disagree, be passionate, argue our positions, push for our positions, debate our positions, have the discourse that needs to be had. But when we let ourselves demagogue and be uncivil, you're not contributing to the type of environment that we as human beings want to strive for. Let me give you an example. If I debate my colleagues on issues, whether they're LGBTQ issues, whether they're immigration issues, whatever, and I'm passionate and we're both passionate, but we don't demagogue one another or hate one another, even though you're upset, you know, there may be other issues where you can agree on. And if they don't hate you and you don't hate them, then guess what? You might find some opportunities to collaborate on. And they might just like you enough to push themselves to meet you halfway, even on issues that they might find as uncomfortable. But if they hate you and you hate them, what do you think that's going to get you? Nothing, zero. And it's going to be this adversarial role every day. There's few exceptions on the left and on the right, but there's always a few that really make it difficult to maintain that composure, decorum, and civility. And I struggle with that too. But for the most part, people, Republicans and Democrats, I think, are decent individuals. There's a lot of theater that goes on in politics. But despite the votes and the disappointment in our differences, we can never demagogue and be uncivil, because the day you do that, you've lost the high moral ground. You've lost the high moral ground. So it's important to keep that in mind. I struggle every day to be true to those values. But it's not to say I don't get mad. I don't get challenged. But as passionate as these issues are and important to me, I try not get so distraught about them that I lose my humanity.
Thank you very much.
So I want to read you an anonymous question. We have several of these, but this one, these have been excellent questions, but this one's a tough question. Somebody asks, if you are a champion for students, specifically students who are underrepresented and historically marginalized, and equity, why do you not pay your congressional interns?
Actually, we do pay our congressional interns. It's not as much as we should, but a few years ago, we did get some funding to pay our congressional interns a stipend. And so we do pay some stipends. Kathy, I'm not sure if you're a recipient of any stipends from our office, but would love to hear from you what arrangement you have. And Ruth, if she's ready to answer this, I would love for her to answer it. But if she doesn't feel ready, because Ruth is a new member of our staff, but we do try to provide, and it all depends on different factors. But Kathy, do you get any stipend from my office?
Yes, I do. I get $1,000 a month.
Yes, so.
There you go. And
Yeah.
but
I
this
thought
is
you might have been the anonymous questioner. That's
Oh,
funny. Okay.
It wasn't me. It
well,
wasn't
but
me.
let me share with you that that is a new phenomenon. We started doing this only 2-3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago. We didn't always do it, and so we try to be helpful. Can we do more? We should be able to do more, but for the time being, I think this was sort of the pilot. This is how we started. Maybe in the future we could pay more, but usually students that do internships, what we can provide becomes complementary to their lives. Like maybe Kathy's part of the UCDC program, and this enriches her experience financially, so that it's meeting her halfway to provide something for all the good work she's doing, and helping her out to the extent that we can. Most people that do interns, not all, no, I better not say that. I was going to say a generality, but I could be wrong. But we try to provide some internship stipends, right, Ruth?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Good. That was I'm glad you were able to answer that one.
So anonymous, take that.
No,
Yeah.
it's a real issue because without compensation, internships tend to be limited to those who can afford them. And that's a real problem. So that's a
No,
wonderful thing.
absolutely. That is a major issue. I'll give you an example. You know, I don't know how UCDC works, but I'm assuming there's scholarships for people who come to UCDC as well.
But not
Because
enough.
if not,
even close to enough.
Yeah, but if not, that's also very limiting. So I think there's a number of programs on campus. There's the CHCI fellowship internships. I mean, on campus, on the Hill. But you're right. Most of the folks who do internships, there's not as many people of lower income levels, and that usually tends to be more minorities than not. But we should and could do more.
Okay. Again, we still have time for a few more questions. We have some anonymous questions here, but I'd love to get the named people in there so you could show your face. Let me put you on the spot about that briefly again with interns. It's not as controversial. Is there, I mean, you're the boss, and I realize you're not the one working with the interns. You have staff people who do that, who select them. But is there anything that an intern can do that gets your attention and that you might give advice to folks?
Well, let me tell you what I do. I don't wait for the interns to tell me. I usually tell my staff that I need to have some FaceTime with our interns. I think interns will tell you that too many of them do internships in Washington, and they're invisible to the members of Congress. Invisible. They're lucky the members even know their names, where they're from, what they do. And that is unacceptable in my book. And if you check with my staff or my team or my interns, they'll tell you. I mean, Kathy's relatively new, and we've been trying to set something up. But I believe that I should get to know my interns somewhat on some level, despite the limited time they spend with us. I usually take them to the members' dining room. We have a nice lunch. I try to have some interface. We try to give them constructive projects. What I would encourage interns to do, since most members of Congress are out of it. Did I say that? Most members of Congress are out of it in terms of the interface they should have with you. Don't let them get away with that. You tell your team, the staff you work with, that you would like to have some FaceTime with the congressman. And if they think he's too important to do that, then that just tells you what kind of office you're in. No one should ever deny you that opportunity, especially if you're working in that office.
Congressman, you do have a good reputation as far as this goes. I know from talking to students, because we also have had students, had a student who talked about taking a picture on the last day with their member of Congress, sort of a standard thing. And they overheard over the transom, this member is a woman, say, I thought he was the mailman guy. I didn't know he was an intern. This is on the last day of an internship. And boy, that's different.
Well, it's also unfortunate for the interns like Kathy and others that are doing an internship during COVID, because it doesn't lend itself to having more interface other than on a Zoom, which we're going to have pretty soon. But it's just not the ideal circumstance. We usually try to give our interns, when they leave, a small token of our appreciation. Like I said, I try to take them to the members' dining room. We try to make sure that we're providing good, constructive opportunities for our interns. But you do that when people are physically together more than via Zoom.
Well, you can always do a rain check on that. Kathy will be in
Yeah, no,
Washington
absolutely.
someday, right?
That's right.
So another anonymous question. For college graduates looking for careers in public service, do you think elected office is the best route, or would you recommend other careers to make a difference in these polarized times?
I would never tell anybody that what's one best route over another, but I will tell you that people get enamored of political offices. They're like, it's power, it's interesting, you're the decision maker, your name's in neon lights, you run for office. But I will tell you that I think the most successful elected officials are those that try to embark on things that are of interest, things that are your passion in the community, whatever that might be it in government, nonprofit, school, university setting, you name it. Whatever your passion is, if your passion is helping youth, there's tons of youth organizations. If your passion is eradicating poverty, there's tons of public policy and food banks on two extremes, that deal with that issue. If you're interested in public policy in certain areas, certainly you could work on the Hill, state legislatures. If you're interested in local government, no matter what the issue is, recreation, public works, healthcare, you name it, you can get involved with local governments. I would say get involved, start out your career in areas that you're passionate about. Elected office is always there for you. It's always there. From now until you die, you can always run for, if you're a doctor, you can run for office when you're like, okay, I'm done, or I want to take a break. If you're a lawyer, you could always run for office when you want. If you're an engineer, you could do the same. Senator Padilla from California is an engineer. Tony Cardenas is an engineer. I myself was in local government and served in local nonprofits for many years. It all depends what your passion is and your calling. But always remember, elected office is always there as one avenue, but you don't have to think of it as I'm doing this because I want to run for office. I want to do this. It'll come to you. Work so you have a foundation of a network and experience in whatever field you have passion for. And then someday you could say, no, I'm going to start looking at, maybe someday I want to run for city council or supervisor or whatever it is. But a lot of people don't understand is that there's a process to get there. And even if you're independently wealthy, you just don't wake up one day and say, yeah, I got the money. I'm going to run a great campaign because I got $3 million. Sometimes those millionaires don't win because money doesn't do it. The electorate see right through that. I think what the electorate want to see is, who are you? What have you done that shows a commitment to this region or this community that you're running for? Show me who you run with. Show me what you've done. Show me your passion. And in the process, you have these networks of friends, colleagues, individuals you interface with, stakeholders, that when you run, they're going to be there for you because they know you. And those people are going to also donate to your campaign, because at the end of the day, we still have a campaign. We have campaigns. Our democracy is based on raising funds so you could run a campaign and have the resources to send out mailers, to run TV, to hire staff. So that doesn't come overnight and easy. And like I said, unless you're independently wealthy, and even then, there's a process to getting there.
All right, Congressman, we only have time for one more question, and barely that, but I figure this will be a short answer probably anyways. Nancy Pelosi says that this is, well, she said she was only going to be speaker for 2 more terms a term ago. So this is likely her last term as Speaker. I recognize the protocol of the House. You certainly wouldn't say that somebody should replace her, but if and when Nancy Pelosi leaves, who's going to be the next Speaker of the House?
Hakeem Jeffries.
I did not expect a straight answer from you, but that's okay. Fantastic. Thank you.
If and when Nancy decides that she doesn't want to stay there, which I think Nancy's done a phenomenal job, and I would hope that she's willing to do at least one more term that rounds out this term of this president. And she's the most experienced person we've ever had as Speaker, most prepared. She's brilliant. And I think we would be fools as Democrats to not have her as a Speaker at least for one more term. But it's up to her. She did say that, but I think a lot of people are going to be recruiting her to stay on for one more term. But if for some reason she says, no, I made a commitment, I'm gone, then I think that Hakeem Jeffries is the very likely success.
And he's a congressman from where? From
Hakeem Jeffries is from New York.
Right. Okay. Thank you for
He's right now the chairman of the Democratic Caucus. So he's in our leadership already.
And he's also about 30 years younger than anybody else in leadership.
And he's articulate. He's just, you know, whether you loved her or you didn't, President Barack Obama, remember his oratory skills? Hakeem Jeffries has those skills.
Okay. Congressman, thank you very much for talking to us. It's fantastic to have you. And when we open in person, I hope you'll be back. For those people who are members of his district and for anybody who's worked for him like Kathy, take him up on his offer to stop by the office when you're in Washington.
Hey, and I'm sorry your anonymous person doesn't get a stipend from her or his member of Congress.
And they should demand it. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. And take care. We'll have you back.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. Have a good day, and I wish you all the best. Godspeed.